The rain was unrelenting that Thursday morning in Chicago. Sheets of water spilled from the gray sky, bouncing off sidewalks and pooling into puddles that swallowed entire curbs. A luxury black sedan idled awkwardly on the side of West Roosevelt Road, its hazard lights blinking faintly through the downpour. The front passenger tire was flat, a shredded mess of rubber. Inside the vehicle sat Charlotte Westbrook, mid-40s, crisp navy blazer, pearl earrings, and a schedule tighter than a drum. CEO of Haven Tech Logistics, the kind of woman who negotiated million-dollar deals before breakfast. But that morning she was stuck. Her driver had left to get help an hour ago, and the tow truck was nowhere to be seen. She was scrolling through her phone, trying to keep calm, when a knock startled her. She looked up to see a man standing at the window, soaked to the bone, a shopping cart behind him covered in a blue tarp. He had a scruffy beard, tired eyes, and wore a threadbare military jacket with the name Davis faintly visible on the chest. "Ma'am," he said through the glass, "you need help with that tire." She hesitated. Everything she'd been taught told her to lock the doors. But something in his tone, it wasn't desperate or intrusive, it was grounded. It was... She cracked the window. "I don't have a spare?" "I know," he said, holding up a wrench and a strange contraption he'd fashioned from scrap. "But I can patch it enough to get you off the curb. I used to do this. Before. Well, before everything." She didn't know why she said yes. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was the quiet conviction in his voice. Maybe it was because for once in her life the power dynamic had flipped. He worked silently, quickly laying cardboard on the ground before sliding under the car. Within 10 minutes, he had jacked up the vehicle, applied a sealant from an old canister, and used strips of reinforced rubber he'd clearly salvaged from another tire. When he was done, he wiped his hands on a rag and stepped back. "It'll get you a few blocks. Just don't hit any potholes." Charlotte stepped out, heels clicking on wet concrete. Where did you learn that?" He gave a half smile. "Navy, Mechanics Division, 6 years, Afghanistan, Somalia. Long time ago." She reached into her purse, pulling out a $100 bill. He shook his head. "Don't need your money. But just needed to do something that mattered today." Before she could respond, he turned, pushed his cart through the slush, and disappeared down the alley. She stood there for a moment, completely still. Then got back into the car, heart pounding, not from fear, but from something else. Something she couldn't quite name yet. The next day, the limo showed up at the shelter. The shelter director, a weary man in corduroy and glasses named Mr. Talley, opened the door and stared at the stretch limousine idling outside with open disbelief. Nobody rich came down to West Jackson Boulevard without a security detail or a camera crew. "Can I help you?" he asked the driver cautiously. The suited man stepped out crisp and composed. "I'm here for Mr. Eric Davis." Talley blinked. "Eric, you sure?" The man nodded. "Miss Westbrook would like to speak with him. Personally." Talley rubbed his beard. "He's probably cleaning out the back alley. Let me get him." Eric was in his usual place, sorting bottles for recycling behind the building, his sleeves rolled up and an old radio playing faint Motown in the background. When Talley told him the CEO lady from yesterday had sent a limo, Eric laughed. "Real funny?" "No joke, Eric. They're waiting out front. Said she wants to talk." Eric wiped his hands, heart thudding. "I didn't do it for a job, you know." "I know, that's probably why she's back." He reluctantly followed Talley to the front where the driver opened the limo door. Inside was leather walnut trim and a chilled bottle of water. For a man who had slept on cardboard last night, it was like stepping into a spaceship. When he arrived at the Haven Tech headquarters, glass steel and security passes, he felt every eye on him. But no one stopped him. The receptionist gave a polite nod. "Ms. Westbrook is expecting you." The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, he stepped into a conference room with panoramic views of the city. Charlotte Westbrook stood at the far end, tapping an espresso cup on the table. "You showed up," she said. "Didn't think I had a choice," he replied. She smiled. "I suppose that's true." She motioned for him to sit. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "You saved me yesterday, but that's not why I called you here." Eric sat quietly, hands folded. "I did some digging last night," she continued. "I found your discharge records, your commendations. Navy Mechanics Chief, multiple deployments, spotless record." He looked down, jaw tight. "You were honorably discharged, worked in private security, then things went south. Medical bills, eviction. You lost your wife in 2016. Eric flinched. That part wasn't in the record. She nodded slowly. It was in the obituary. Silence stretched. I've been in this business long enough to know when someone's overqualified and overlooked, she said. We hire consultants who charge 5 figures for half the skills you used on a street curb. Eric met her eyes. Why me? You don't know me? No, she said. But I've ignored too many like you. Yesterday reminded me how dangerous that is. She pushed a folder across the table. A 3-month consulting contract. Full pay. Housing stipend. If it works out, we'll talk full time. Eric didn't move. I'm not doing this to save you, she added. I'm doing it because this company needs someone like you more than you need us. Finally, Eric opened the folder. The numbers were real. The terms were generous. He looked up, eyes wide. You don't want me to wear a suit, do you? She laughed. Just show up. He reached for the pen. Rick Davis didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay in a real bed in a studio apartment arranged by Haven Tech's HR team, clean sheets, running water, and a tiny potted plant by the window. He kept the contract folder on the nightstand, opening it 3 times just to make sure it hadn't vanished. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror wearing khaki slacks and a button-up shirt that still had the tags on it. His hands, calloused from years of labor, felt stiff trying to button the collar. He stared at himself, unfamiliar and unsure. At Haven Tech, people stared as he walked in, some curious, others skeptical. He could feel it. He was the outsider, the mystery man who'd appeared out of nowhere and been hired by the CEO herself. By noon, the whispers had already started. Who is he? He was homeless 2 days ago. There's no way he's qualified. But Eric didn't flinch. He reported to the engineering floor, where he was assigned to assist with a systems audit, something Haven Tech had delayed for months due to budget cuts. Try not to break anything, someone muttered under their breath. He said nothing. By 3 p.m., he had flagged 12 infrastructure issues, 2 of which could have cost the company millions in downtime if left unchecked. He didn't brag. He simply wrote a report, emailed it to the department head, and returned to calibrating a torque sensor on a prototype arm. That night, the head of engineering, a woman named Priya, barged into Charlotte's office holding a tablet. Who is this guy? She asked. Charlotte smiled behind her coffee mug. Why? He just saved us 6 figures by catching a hydraulic misalignment. My team's been trying to figure it out for weeks. Charlotte only said that's why. Eric didn't know what winning looked like anymore. He only knew how to survive. So he kept his head down and his work sharp. But as the week went on, something began to shift. Engineers started asking for his input. A junior developer brought him coffee. A manager stopped by just to say, thanks. Still not everyone was thrilled. In a corner office on the top floor, Vice President Gerald Huxley reviewed the new consultant's file. His lips curled as he tapped a pen against the desk. Charlotte's pet project, he muttered. He called an assistant. Bring me the paperwork on this. Davis character. I want everything. Meanwhile, Eric was too busy fixing things to notice the storm brewing above him. He stayed late, skipped breaks, and spent time walking the floor talking with mechanics like old friends. Then one morning it happened. A team was testing a new AI-guided loading arm when a power surge short-circuited the failsafe. The arm jerked violently toward a young technician barely out of college who froze in panic. Eric was across the room. He didn't think, he moved. He yanked the technician backward just as the arm crashed into the floor, splintering the concrete. Silence. Then the sirens. Charlotte arrived minutes later. Paramedics checked the technician, shaken but unharmed. Eric had a sprained wrist and a bruised shoulder. He waved off the attention. I've been through worse, he said. But Charlotte stood frozen, staring at him. Later in her office, she asked, why did you do it? You could have been seriously hurt. Eric shrugged. That kid has a whole life ahead of him. I've had mine. She looked at him long and hard. Maybe it's just starting. That evening, Haven Tech sent a company-wide email commending Eric Davis for his actions. And this time, the gossip wasn't bitter, it was inspired. The Monday after the incident, something unexpected happened. Eric's name was printed on a placard outside a door on the 2nd floor. It read, Eric Davis, Operations Consultant. Clean, bold, real. But with visibility came pushback. Gerald Huxley, VP of Strategic Affairs, wasn't done. He'd built his entire career on pedigree and polish Ivy League polished shoes, tailored suits. To him, Eric's story was a gimmick, a temporary feel-good distraction. He scheduled a meeting with Charlotte Westbrook behind closed doors. "This isn't sustainable," he said. "We can't set a precedent where anyone off the street can leap into this kind of role." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "We didn't pull him off the street. We found him hiding in plain sight." Gerald scoffed. "Be honest, this is PR." "No," she said coldly. "This is ROI." He leaned forward. "And what happens when he cracks? When the lack of corporate experience catches up? He's already saved us time, money, and a lawsuit. Tell me, Gerald, how many Ivy League grads jumped in front of a robotic arm last week?" He had no answer. Still, the whispers resumed. Not loud, but persistent. Questions in the boardroom. Concerns in HR. Huxley even floated the idea of issuing a review of Eric's contract. But Charlotte had other plans. That Friday, during the company's quarterly town hall meeting, she stood at the podium and said, "Before we begin, I want to introduce someone." She turned and gestured. Eric stepped onto the stage. There was polite applause, a few raised eyebrows. One audible, "Is that him?" Charlotte spoke again. "A week ago, this man saved a young technician's life. 2 weeks ago, he solved an engineering issue that had stalled a $3 million project. But more than that, he reminded us of something we've forgotten, that potential doesn't wear a name tag, and brilliance doesn't always come in a boardroom." She looked at Eric. "Tell them your story." Eric hesitated at the mic. His palms were sweating, but he cleared his throat and spoke. "I didn't come here for a second chance," he began. "I didn't think there'd be one." The room went quiet. "I joined the Navy to escape the neighborhood I grew up in. I stayed because I found purpose. After discharge, I thought I could build something, but life doesn't always follow orders. My wife got sick. The bills piled up. I lost her. Then I lost myself. Someone in the back shifted uncomfortable. I started sleeping in a car, then on benches, then behind grocery stores. People looked right past me, like I wasn't there. I learned to stop speaking." He paused, until one day someone listened. Charlotte folded her hands, watching intently. "This company didn't save me," he said, "but it saw me. And in doing that, it reminded me who I used to be." Silence, then applause, then a standing ovation. Even the skeptics stood. Even Gerald Huxley clapped once reluctantly. That day changed something. Interns approached him in the break room just to shake his hand. Junior staff asked for mentorship. One even said, "I told my dad about you." He cried. Eric began hosting informal after-hours workshops on mechanical systems. He called them Back to Basics. People showed up. And slowly, Haven Tech changed. Not because of a diversity initiative or a press release, but because someone finally connected the dots between humanity and capability. Still, Eric never forgot the alley, the shelter, the nights under scaffolding. One morning, he stopped by the old shelter with 2 boxes, one filled with new boots, the other with old laptops donated by Haven Tech. "These guys don't need pity," he told Mr. Talley. "They need purpose." Talley nodded. "And you, my friend, just became theirs." The next board meeting was tense. Gerald Huxley stood at the long walnut table, a digital report behind him, filled with charts and metrics. "We need to reevaluate our hiring standards," he said. "What happened with Mr. Davis might feel like a success story, but feelings don't drive shareholder value. Predictability does." He clicked to the next slide. It showed resumes, degrees, credentials. Experience, certification, structure. "We don't gamble with logistics." Charlotte didn't flinch. "That's exactly the problem," she said calmly. "We've been hiring safety nets, not brilliance." A murmur filled the room. She stood. "You want numbers? Since Eric joined equipment, downtime dropped 11%. Repair costs are down 17%. Productivity is up 8%. He's already paid for his contract twice over." Another board member leaned forward. "And what happens if this attention fades? If it turns into scandal?" Charlotte turned. "Scandal. For giving someone a shot they earned." Silence. Gerald sat his argument suddenly flimsy. But he wasn't finished. The next morning, an anonymous email circulated. An incident report from 6 years ago, a minor dispute Eric had with a manager at a gas station job. No violence, just frustration over a paycheck that bounced. The report was exaggerated and incomplete, but it was enough to raise flags. Eric was called in. When he walked into the conference room and saw Charlotte, HR, and a compliance officer, his gut twisted. "We just need context," Charlotte said gently. Eric stayed calm. "Yeah. I was working 3 jobs. My rent was late. They shorted my check, then told me to come back next week. I got angry, said a few things I shouldn't have. Were you arrested? No, I left. I've regretted it ever since. The compliance officer took notes. HR nodded. After the meeting, Charlotte followed him to the elevator. They're not firing you, she said. Eric nodded. But someone wants me gone. They're scared, she said. Scared of someone who doesn't fit their blueprint. He looked at her. You? She smiled. I've spent my career pretending to fit theirs. Maybe it's time I stopped. That night, Charlotte called a private meeting with the board. And for the first time in company history, she made a motion to create a new department, internal advancement and hidden talent development. At its center, Eric Davis. It won't just be about him, she explained. It'll be about all the others we've missed. Former teachers driving delivery vans, veterans sweeping warehouses, immigrants coding in internet cafes. We've spent millions recruiting overseas while ignoring the gold on our own loading docks. The vote was close, 5-4, but it passed. Eric got the news the next morning in a quiet email with just one line. You're not a consultant anymore, you're a department head. His hands trembled. He stared at the screen for a long time before exhaling the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Weeks passed. Eric moved into a permanent apartment. He traded his old work boots for a pair of Oxfords but kept the boots in a box by his door. His office was modest. Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a corkboard filled with names. Every name was someone overlooked, someone he was helping lift up. One afternoon, a shy young woman from the cleaning crew knocked on his door. Sir? She said, eyes down. Mr. Davis, I speak Russian, and Turkish, I used to teach. He smiled gently. Come in, let's talk. By the end of the year, 10 new hires had come through his program. Turnover dropped. Morale rose. And something else happened, something subtle. People started saying hello more, listening longer, assuming less. One snowy morning, Charlotte passed Eric in the hallway. You've changed this place, she said. He shook his head. I just reminded it who it could be. That weekend, Eric visited the old shelter. Mr. Talley was retiring and they held a small party. Nothing fancy, just cake, coffee, and old vinyls playing in the background. When it was Eric's turn to speak, he stood in front of the room and said, I used to believe I had nothing left, that my skills were rust, that my best years were behind me. But someone saw me, really saw me, and changed my life with one word, yes. He paused. So if you're sitting here wondering if it'll ever be your turn, just hold on. Sometimes the world doesn't need a hero. It just needs someone willing to show up. He stepped down to applause. Later that night, back at his apartment, Eric opened a handwritten note that had been slipped under his door. No return address. I work in accounting. I have a degree in mechanical engineering from Syria. No one ever asked. Thank you for making me believe again. Eric folded the note gently and placed it in the drawer beside his boots. Call to action, CTA. If this story touched you, share it. You never know who might need to hear it today. Leave a comment about a time someone believed in you or when you finally believed in yourself. Subscribe to hear more stories of hope, redemption, and the extraordinary hidden in the everyday. Because sometimes, brilliance doesn't wear a badge or carry a title. Sometimes, brilliance wears yesterday's coat and fixes your future with calloused hands.